Recording.
We are
Thank you.
now. Excellent. Thanks for reminding. Okay. So as Judy just mentioned, I sent around over email an agenda. I don't know if Evan had a chance to put it up on the web. I'll share my screen with it right now. Let's adjust it in real time all together. I'll just say the logic, and I'm happy to, if folks would prefer a different logic. The logic was quick hits on each of the task groups for refinements to the priority actions. And we do that for each of the three. And then it logically moves us into the biomass issue coming out of task group 3. And the largest chunk of time on this agenda is about that biomass. So the idea would be like about 10 minutes on each of these and 20 minutes on biomass. We can do public comment before biomass, after biomass, as people want. But somewhere here, throw some public comment in there and use the wrap up and next steps. Just do that as just a minute, and we can use those 5 minutes for public comment. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We definitely need to stay on time here today. So one thing I'll just mention is what we aren't able to do in this time is a full review of the full suite of strategies and actions. And so my recommendation to this subcommittee is you say to the council, listen, we had a chance to review our priority actions. We have not had a chance to really do a detailed review of all of our strategies and actions. We're going to need to do that after you meet on the 16th, and just say, this is as far as we got. That would be my recommendation. And that means you all as a subcommittee meeting maybe next week, maybe early next year, to do that sort of more detailed review all the way through everything. That would be my recommendation of what we do today. Because I think it's only fair for you as a subcommittee to have a chance to really sit with those documents, look at that full suite beyond the priority actions, and have a conversation about it.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. Should we dive in then? So what I'll do is, with each of the task group leads, just ask you to throw up on the screen somehow, or if it's in my email, I can pull it up, the most recent version of the priority actions. And let's have a discussion and see how we're feeling about them. And if we need to have some nuanced messaging to the council where we're not all aligned on certain things, or we're feeling really uncomfortable on certain things, we can include that in the notes we send up to the council. So Ryan, you're up first on task group 1, sharing the most recent version of priority actions.
All right, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, so here is the most recent. Are you seeing the
Yep.
Group 1 reduce and sequester top 5 priority actions?
Yep.
Excellent. The spreadsheet.
There's a request to make it a little bigger. If you can zoom in just a bit.
There we go. To the margins, 200%. If folks really want to get into details, Justin is here and he can talk about how this is situated within that larger matrix. What we've done here is pulled out the synthesizing of all of the actions into, top 5 priority synthesized actions that will help natural and working lands, focus on working lands, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and sequester carbon in soils and biomass. So the first one is increase funding, enhance, and adapt existing state of Vermont programs that support greenhouse gas emissions reduction, soil carbon sequestration, and/or climate adaptation and resiliency on working lands. Enhance and adapt programs to better incorporate climate mitigation, adaptation, resilience, nature-based solutions, and TEK-IK. Update the greenhouse gas emission inventory to account for both carbon sequestration and emission reduction benefits from agriculture. Example state programs include, but are not limited to, some of the AFN programs, ANR, and then a nod to our federal partners who have just as much, if not more, funding to support these practices. As mentioned last time, we'll need some, and it may be in the matrix and it just is not translated here, but just to call out some of the A&R programs that help support that is the missing piece there. The second priority action is to fund and implement payment for ecosystem service programs for natural and working lands to encourage landowners, managers to implement practices that improve soil health, crop and forest resilience, increase carbon storage, increase stormwater storage capacity, and reduce runoff. It says fund existing ag PES programs and expand to include or develop new programs for forestry. We have drafted another sentence of qualifying language that attempts to accurately characterize the types of PES programs that are authorized and funded in Vermont as compared to the type of PES programs that they have been erroneously associated with, and they in no way are a carbon market or anything like that. So we can put that qualifying language in here if people think it is useful or necessary, but is not there right now. Enhance education outreach, research, and technical assistance programming to encourage adoption of strategies that increase climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience on natural working lands. Education should target farmers and loggers and those providing TA, and should incorporate nature-based solutions around traditional ecological knowledge and indigenous knowledge. Number 4, the protection of the soils. Protect farmland and manage forest lands from development pressures through land conservation and protection programs. So these land uses can continue to provide climate mitigation, adaptation, and resilience benefits. Enhance existing state land use protection programs, such as the Vermont Farmland Conservation Program and Forest Conservation Easements, to improve farmland access and protection of agricultural soils and working forests. And then number 5 is to hand off to group number 2. And group number 2 may better represent this, but we wanted to call this out, which is to invest in Vermont's natural and working land owners, managers, and caretakers to enhance farm and forest viability and to support their informed decisions to increase their operations resilience and adaptation to climate change. And that is basically taken verbatim from number 20. And so this is the high-level summary of the 5 priority actions that attempt to leverage the good work that farmers have been doing and state programs that have supported them to implement those practices, as well as try to holistically deploy other supporting services that help farmers and loggers and other land managers make decisions outside of financial assistance programs. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Ryan. That's really helpful to walk through it. And I think, Ryan, we may find with number 5 that the group, the second working group, right, your task group will have the content of that one, right? And so you may not even need it, right? Okay.
Absolutely. We may need to slash it, and the more concise, maybe the easier for people to digest. And so I won't speak for the whole group, but from my perspective, I think it would be fine to drop number 5, provided number 2's move through, and we're all in agreement that they do represent that.
Nice. Thanks, Ryan. Andrew?
First of all, nice job. I really like what you came up with, and it's well articulated. 2, a question and a comment. Question is related to number 1. Does the existing actions and strategies not focus on sequestration? Do they only focus on emission reduction? So that's my question. I'll just tell you my comment while you're thinking about that one. And that is number 3, I think that something similar to that is in all 3 groups. So my question's for the larger group. How much does this entire subcommittee say, here's an action that was endorsed by all 3 of our, or maybe we just need to have it once, but we need to make sure it has the right language that all 3 groups agree on. And there may be others like that. There's definitely overlap with other ones here, but that's the most striking overlap. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks. Andrew, I really appreciate those comments. The initial climate action plan, we in the Ag and Ecosystem Subcommittee, as well as the Task Group 5A that really focused on this question, were insistent on making sure that that mitigation was inclusive of both emission practices that reduce emissions as well as sequestration, and acknowledging that sequestration is the largest role that certainly agricultural lands can play in CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere. And then to answer your question, number 3 is very specific to the service delivery model that exists in the ag conservation delivery sphere. And so while I think this is a call across different, it's one sector, but we're attempting to approach it from different angles, that as you get into the details of number 3, it calls out a specific suite of education and research TA programs, whereas some of the other ones, those are different groups that would be funded. And I think, and from my opinion, it's important to call out under each heading that each one has a specific type of education, outreach, TA, what have you, that's specifically designed or tailored to help address the sequestration versus viability needs. And so I would implore us to keep number 3 with this package, but do agree that it is represented throughout these, what do you call them, groups. And I think that's because there's a strong acknowledgement that, capacitation in TA is a large part of how people change their implementation and how they adopt practices.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah. Right. So it's a word of caution of just like mushing stuff together because there's specificity around the delivery and the delivery model. Okay. Judy?
Looking at that same number 3, yeah, I agree with Andrew. We have a version of that, but we're also addressing more than forests and farmers or farmers and loggers. We're addressing caretakers because of all the laws we have where people put their land in one program or another to protect it, and it's large quantities of land most times. So my recommendation would to look at general ecosystems other places than those within farmers and loggers, and include a word.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, to respond, Judy, and just I'm jumping in to keep, because I think I get the gist of your comment, and this is intentional, right? These are the managers that are on the ground managing land for growing food and crops as well as timber. And so to call out those people specifically is intentional here, and it doesn't mean to take away from other less managed lands, if you want to call them that, or other areas that are more natural than managed, and this bifurcation that we have in those that actively manage. I'll stop. I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but I will just say farmers and loggers were intentionally called out here as they are the managers that are making the decisions for the land, and it's important to situate them as the actors that are going to be most able to adopt new practices or change management, or just keep doing the management to deliver the mitigation and sequestration benefits.
That's actually my point, Ryan. There are a lot of people who are managing and caring for and influencing land other than farmers and loggers, and we can't just drop them off. The title of this committee is Ag and Ecosystems.
Judy,
so we have to look in other places.
Can I suggest that might be a reason to keep the 2 different education and technical assistant focused things, like the one that's coming out of task group 3 and this one, because they do complement each other, right? If you all have a education and technical assistant ones that has that broader lens of what you're talking about, Judy, let's make sure we keep that, right?
Well, I'd rather see common language, because if somebody else looks at this and says it's the same thing and wants to combine, and they combine it with this one, that common language is missing.
Okay, let's take a look at it when we see task group 3 and see if there's ways to make that combination or ways to be very specific that these are 2 complementary pieces. Let's look at it when we have the other one right in front of us. Jael, and then I really want to move on to task group 2.
Yeah. Yeah, so I agree with Judy, and I agree with Ryan that we need to focus on, in some ways we need to focus on farmers and foresters who are in some ways contributing the most to, impacting the environment. In the statute that establishes conservation districts, it mentions all landowners. So anyone within the watershed district is represented, and the conservation districts work with them. So I agree with Judy, I mean, because like landowners can apply for grants to do riparian buffer plantings and those kind of things, so we can serve everyone. And I do think there are landowners that, you know, have logging projects or whatever on their property, and they need to be educated as much as anyone else.
Okay. Would folks be okay if we pick that up when we look at the other piece coming out of task group 3 or the other education and technical assistance pieces, and let's look and see if we can do combined language that has the right scope that we're talking about here? That's great. Okay, so I took 2 notes on this before we move on. First of all, thank you, Ryan, in task group 1. We may drop the 5th action if we're all comfortable with task group 2 actions are hitting that mark. And on the 3rd action, we're going to look at it up against the other education and technical assistance pieces and see where we want to combine into common language or see where they really are different kinds of delivery and things and we need to keep them separate. Okay. Task group 2. Jake, were you going to do that or?
Yeah, and just want to note that I'm sharing what was shared in the last meeting with the hope that this afternoon we can consolidate and make the final edits that need to be made. But nonetheless, I think it's good to share again where we're at, and so let me just do that.
And I will say, as you do that, some of the notes from last time was, could we weave a mention of forestry in some of these actions a little bit better, right? And then we had quite a bit of conversation about some other stuff, but it wasn't entirely clear how that would create changes to this.
Yeah, and so I think so the first 2 here under strategy 19A, and then the one under 20B. So these are all technical assistance oriented around supporting more like adaptation planning and training. And number 6 here is just a little more inclusive of the different audiences for that technical assistance support. So that would be agriculture, landowners, municipalities, and I think this is where we talked about it would be great to have some specific language for forestry, because that language is not really captured here. We added the inclusion of education about TEK, and then 16 here and 20B is oriented around cultivating more partnerships. So we were just acknowledging, I think, with this that there may be some other mentions beyond the conservation districts that would speak to this idea of state, federal, nonprofit, and we added the indigenous tribe and private sort of language to this, and private sector partnership. So the goal here is to, I think, consolidate these 3 into a more concise technical assistance priority. And that may in turn also overlap with has been developed in the other subgroups. So that's kind of what's encompassed in these first 3 here. And again, if Billy or anyone else can send me some suggestions for how to include forestry into this more adequately, that would be great. And then so 20C and 21A are getting at kind of the economic development and resilience incentive supports that should be prioritized. So with 22 here, that's under 20C, and these are just references to the rows in our spreadsheet, so don't take too much into account for that. So I think here what we were thinking about was calling attention to what would be emergency recovery funds for farms and forestry operations. And then 32 is more around the various yeah, kind of more like economic development, market development, and other kinds of economic support incentives and grant programs, including working lands, the development grant program, and also I need to include, Jael had mentioned, just the need to include some of the food access oriented programs that fall under this. So there's just a little more, some more specific language that needs to get added there. And then the last two, so this is like what we're thinking is a very like specific equity oriented priority that's calling attention to the various organizations, entities, indigenous groups, and other BIPOC organizations operating in Vermont that should be receiving additional attention and resources to create more equitable access to local foods and culturally relevant foods, and land and grants and resources and TA and things like that. So that's what that number 40 there is, and 21D and 40 is speaking to. And then I think I think there's a way in which 45 and this 21E could actually be folded into, and this is something I think we were discussing, could be folded into 21, the priority around 21A. So we might take sort of pieces of that and populate it into some of the other strategies that are, or actions that are developed here. So that's kind of a summary, and apologies that this isn't further along, but the goal is hopefully by end of day today that there be additional refinements, and maybe we could share those out once they're completed.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate that. I think our goal for right now in the coming few minutes is to agree on a set of notes of any things that would happen, right? So adding in the forestry still needs to happen. We know that's going to happen. Potentially folding in that last one on food resilience and sort of that number 45, put that up in the other piece around food security and related issues. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else that folks would like to see happen in those priority actions from subgroup 2? Anything else besides those two changes that still need to work in there? Jael?
Yeah, so this is great. For the strategy 21A 32, so in the actual packet, it talks about the Working Lands Enterprise Grant, and it has the words funding to businesses that have climate low carbon goals. And I just was wondering, like, can we add that language back into this number 32?
Yeah. And I think, Jael, it does, the language right now says prioritize investments to farm and food businesses that have climate resilience and mitigate. So that is it's still there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It just worded differently.
Yeah. Some of the phrasing changed just a little bit. Yeah.
And then 21A, it's like the 5th action down. I mean, it has a huge long list of, I thought of everything was my favorite.
Yeah.
But support Vermont food, Vermont farm to school, support organizations in the charitable food system, create local food access funding. So I just think that language could be taken from there and included.
Yep. Yeah. And that's that is the next, that was on my mind and what I was referencing as to what needs to be added to that. Yeah.
So the existing language you have in the spreadsheet on 21A, add that into the sort of language of the priority action language.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Okay, great. Anything else on this set of priority actions coming out of task group 2? Judy?
Yes, that one example you have of using TEK was one that I had given Stephen when he written to me. And but it can be included in all the others too. For some reason, I'm not sure if you get it or not, but it's not in there. And there's no reason why it can't be added to all of those. And the other thing that concerns me is we seem to be going in a path that says our committee is agriculture and forestry. Our committee is not agriculture and forestry. And what addresses general lands and general ecosystems that aren't connected to farming and forestry?
Could it be that task group 3 really steps into that space? Whereas
Well,
task
it could
two-
very well be, but it seems like reducing and sequestering and all of those other hit words that everybody's been using could also step into that area.
Hmm.
Because it just slants the whole committee in a direction of forestry and farming only.
I wonder if we look at task group 3 and then see all this together, if it helps to see that big picture. So
That's
that
what you said for all my other questions too.
I,
All
and I
right, we'll look at task group 3 and see, but you're
Right,
missing my point. We are one task group of 3. If
Mhm.
the other 2 don't address anything and we only do, is that sufficient?
But Judy,
That's
just
the right
to,
question.
I mean, just to call attention to in our set of priorities, so the technical assistance one will be mentioning not only agriculture, but landowners and municipalities as needing like TA support and funding. And yeah, and there's another one here that is speaking to not only just agriculture and forestry, but I think more broadly, like land management in general.
It's just in my mind to ask people to do something and they don't even see themselves included in what we're asking is problematic. They have to see themselves in these. And if we just address farmers and loggers, the general public who are landowners won't see themselves in these comments or recommendations. And that's what we're here for. We're not just here for farmers and loggers. We're here for everybody. All land.
Thanks, Judy.
Judy,
Ryan?
can I'd like to respond, Judy. Like, I appreciate aspirational rhetoric about, how to emphasize all of the human interactions with land and the ways in which people can have actions that, depending on the perspective, have a positive or negative externality. But at the end of the day, the reason why farming and forestry is being emphasized by the Ag and Ecosystem Subcommittee, or at least these first 2 task groups, is because these are real economic sectors that can contribute a significant amount of climate benefit, and they are in significant economic decline, and they are significantly affected by the flooding that we've seen that is induced by climate change. And so to call out these sectors as a small number of individuals that manage a lot of land, I think it's entirely appropriate to emphasize, and acknowledge the economic realities under which these sectors operate, and to ignore that they do have to be, economically viable to be able to continue to operate, I think is important. And within Vermont, I think it's appropriate that this subcommittee calls out that fact, because every other initiative I'm involved in, agriculture and forestry is, not the preferred land use. It's not the recommendation that a lot of these other, perspectives are giving space for. And so I strongly encourage the group to put front and center the fact that there is economic activity in these areas, and they are really affected by climate change, and they have a lot of opportunity to provide climate benefit. And so, to me, I think it's entirely appropriate where it breaks down that way. Thanks.
I appreciate your opinion, but as I've said 101 times, economy cannot be the answer to this solution, to this climate crisis.
I would love to be able to look at this full suite and see if there's a way, once we've done that, of weaving into things coming out of task group 2 or 1, greater mention of broader actors beyond farmers and foresters. But I think we really need to see the full suite, and I want to make sure we leave time to talk about biomass as well. And I think what Judy's putting on the table loud and clear is when we talk about farmers and foresters, in the same breath, can we also make a nod to other players involved in the landscape, and so they can see that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I think there's probably opportunities to do that. And I think task group 3's recommendation really lean heavily in there. And that's going to be a helpful balance to the emphasis on farmers and foresters. That's going to be a big part of task groups 1 and 2. Andrew and Judy, do you, and Stephen and others, do you want to give us a quick look at the latest version of task group 3's priority actions?
Yep, I can try to do that.
Can you share your screen? 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm not sure I have it.
I'm going to try that.
If you can't, I'll dig into my email. Maybe something's there.
It is. It was. I shared it just a couple minutes ago, earlier before this meeting. Sent around a link and an attachment, but I have it
Okay.
ready to share also. If Andrew.
Did that work?
No.
Not seeing it.
All right, Billy, do you mind doing it just so we don't waste a lot of time?
Yeah. Let's see. There's the share button.
Hopefully it's the right file.
Yeah, I just gotta find it now. There it is. Let me know if folks can see that.
Almost. Yes.
Great.
Okay.
And
I'm
Billy,
gonna-
I apologize, but I'm going to have you do a little scrolling because I'd like to do it in priority order.
Yep. I'm gonna blow it up a little bit and scroll down to number 1.
Perfect.
There you go. Is that
Thank you.
size
So-
good for people?
Yeah. See
Okay.
it.
So, so Judy and Earl and I met and did some refinements after our last meeting and realized that the summary slide I gave there was misleading and it was over summarized and lost way too much. So we're kind of back to giving you a little more detail, but we did refine some things. Here's this. Our first priority does address biomass as well as renewable energy siting. This could set the stage for a biomass discussion. It may be that if there's a separate message on biomass that captures it, but we strongly believe this is a really high priority, and you can see the language there about eliminating the use of biomass as an energy source and not referring to it as renewable energy. The rest of this priority action relates to the siting of renewable energy to avoid impact to natural systems by both incentivizing siting in developed areas in an equitable way and avoiding through disincentives impacts on natural areas, forests, and agricultural lands, particularly prime agricultural lands. So this is a combination of those two things, and it may change depending on our biomass discussion. So that's number 1, and there are 6, but we can address that in a minute. Bill, if you don't mind scrolling up till you see number 2. There it is. So hopefully this one's fairly straightforward, and overall, what we were thinking about here is how do we take actions that restore and conserve ecosystems such that they can help address mitigation and adaptation and resilience of climate change. And this one is focused specifically on resilience of river corridors through the conservation and restoration of floodplains and wetlands and riparian areas. and incentivizing water storage. And clearly there may be opportunities through the Act 121 that passed in the last session that should be part of this. So this is, as all of them, we reference land and water caretakers as the overarching term to address those who can help do this. So this is a really good opportunity. There's clearly going to be some overlap with some of the actions that Ryan presented in terms of farmers and foresters taking some of these actions. So that's number 2 on resilience in river corridors, and number 3 is somewhere. There it is. So this one is really about connectivity, and state agencies will work to promote strategic and equitable statewide landscape connectivity and forest block conservation towards 30 by 30 goals and 50 by 50 goals. It's not stated there, but and doing that through existing tools, including Vermont conservation design and other Western science that really importantly is braided in with traditional ecological knowledge and indigenous knowledge. And as part of this, the conservation planning and implementation will allow at least 9% of Vermont's forest to become old forest. And one of the ways to do that is specifically target the top 15% of the matrix forest within the conservation design, the highest priority forest blocks. And that should include land within national forests. And to do that, to achieve this condition of old forest, and importantly also to protect sacred sites. So that's number 3. Number 4 is, I can't remember which direction, Billy. I'm thinking is up. There it is. So this is really about prioritizing, incentivizing a suite of nature-based solutions that and traditional ecological knowledge for addressing climate change. And this is basically saying through all of the state regulatory programs and assessments and planning and prioritization frameworks and funding associated with climate change, that this approach of nature-based solutions, letting ecosystems actually be the solution, is strongly prioritized. That's really, this is an overarching priority that we ask that this approach guides the work of planning and implementation. Number 5. State land management agencies shall adapt their management of land. So this is about state land management agencies like Forest and Parks, Fish and Wildlife, using these nature-based solutions to address climate impacts, increased ecosystem resilience, enhance biological diversity, and improve water quality, and enhance resilience funds to support the financial capacity of other land and water caretakers, again, land and water caretakers, to achieve these goals. And this to me is a strong statement about the fact that if we do this right, there will be tremendous co-benefits of doing climate change actions for water quality and biodiversity particularly. And therefore we should be working with partners that are focused on those, like Fish and Wildlife Department for biodiversity programs like the Lake Champlain Basin Program, and the conservation districts who are focused on water quality. I think we need to work together towards these common goals, which can be the same actions that achieve biodiversity, water quality, as well as climate change resiliency and mitigation. So that's 5. And then 6 is another version of our bonus one here is another version of the technical assistance, education and planning. And our suggestion is by folding the right language into the other technical assistance and education priorities that we've already heard about. I think this one could be taken out of ours and just making sure that this language, including land and water caretakers and braided Western Science and TEK, IK, that this could easily just be folded into what was presented by Ryan and Jake, or some combination. So that would get us down to 5. And that's where we are.
Thanks, Andrew. Fantastic. Okay, and I appreciate the thought on number 6 there, where the key pieces there are talking about other lands and waters caretakers, and then also the braiding Western Science and TEK, IK. Yeah, those are the key phrases. And so if we could imagine how those work their way into others, yeah. Ryan, and I am also happy to, as we do this, let's go right into the biomass conversation, and we'll take some public comment, and then we'll have a final wrap up at the end. Ryan?
Please remove the biomass recommendation from the renewable energy siting point.
Yeah.
That renewable energy siting point is a significant policy area that should not be conflated with the biomass issue. And biomass should be its own recommendation if group number 3 feels it's important to put forward my voice on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm so glad you said that. And I had exactly the same feeling. Don't worry about having 6 or 7. It's fine.
Okay.
I would highly recommend taking that first sentence and making its own recommendation, and let's talk about it on its own. And that allows everybody who's totally on board with everything in the rest of that recommendation to stay on board. And then we can have a conversation about biomass, if that is okay with the task group.
That makes complete sense to me. We just wanted to put forward that is a really high priority. But
Right.
that makes complete sense to me if we as an overall group can come up with an approach on biomass. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
What
So-
doesn't make sense to me is taking that sentence and making it a low priority.
Exactly. So that's the conversation to have now, right? And you all did extra credit in ranking 1 to 6. I think the goal here is to say what advances. And by advancing, you're signaling it's a high priority. And if you want to signal even more that it's like you're number 1, fantastic. But that's kind of like almost like an extra credit kind of situation. The key is let's get this package of priority actions, consolidated. Okay. Stephen had a very specific question in the chat I want to deal with, and then I want to talk biomass for a second. That 9% versus the 10%, is that referencing some study or something or other? I don't know if you see that, Andrew, in the chat.
I think it's the Vermont Conservation Design target for Old Forest.
There we go. That's what we needed. Okay.
Yeah,
thanks.
I believe that target uses slightly different words. It says up to or something like that, and we're saying at least. So there's an important change in language there. So, but yeah, that's I think that's where it came from.
Really helpful. Okay. Folks comfortable we talk biomass for a little bit here? Okay. So let's imagine.
Do you want me to stop sharing screen?
Could we, yeah, stop sharing screen. That actually is the right thing to do. Yep. So on biomass, just remind everyone, the council has a addendum on biomass where they specifically call it out. We shared it in the notes. We looked at it. I just want to make sure everybody has that. I'll drop the link in the chat. The reason the council took that up and went to it is there was a biomass group in which some of you were involved that made recommendations. And one of the key recommendations, it had an option 1 and an option 2 because the group had different views. And the council looked at all that and made this addendum that I threw in the chat. And the addendum fundamentally talks about doing a significant study to look at the emissions issues and then look at the economic issues of different approaches in terms of walking away from biomass particularly for electricity production is what this was about. I'm just going to share my screen 1 second. There's one more thing I wanted to say about what the council did the last time it did this is at the end of this, and some of you may have witnessed this conversation when they had it, they said, okay, the people who are in charge now of evaluating new biomass would be the Public Utilities Commission. So what the council is recommending is that the PUC evaluate biomass based on the results of the study, and if the study is still ongoing, it should review and address the issues that this study is looking at, right? The climate issues, the emissions issues, and the economic issues. All right, so that's the way the council addressed the issue of what to do now while the study is ongoing. The council also said, go fund the study, which is something that hasn't happened, much to a lot of people's frustration. So just
So the
FYI.
study is not ongoing. You said while the study is ongoing.
Correct. It hasn't started, right? Sorry, while the study is being conducted or prior to the study being conducted, the council assumed the study would be conducted. That's why that language is there. It hasn't happened yet. All right. So this is what the council did, and this is why I'm just showing it sort of where the council's mind was when they took this up. Right. You all can recommend either the version that you just saw on the screen from the task group, right? And I'll read it back because I wrote it down while we're talking, right? So what the task group just said was, give me 1 second. Oh my God, where'd it go?
Do you want me to put it back up?
No, I just was looking at the wrong file. I'll throw it in the chat so it's just up there. This is what the task group just said. All right, state agencies shall eliminate the use of biomass as an energy source and stop referring to it as renewable energy, right? So that's what you all just put forward. We've also, in the last time we spoke, talked about a potential option that represents some of your views, but not all of your views, is go forth, fund the study, and do the study as soon as possible, right? And then others said something along the lines of, do the study, but in the meantime, don't permit any more biomass facilities until the study's done. So the study results. So there's versions of what you've said, and I just want to lay those out there. Earl?
Thank you. That was what I wanted to say. Was the last thing you said was that we advocate for or recommend a moratorium during the study period because we know we have one biomass facility up for permit, and that company has said if they get the permit, they want to build 8 more. So, you know, theoretically, by the time the study's done, we have more and more biomass facilities scattered around the state. So I think a moratorium during the study period is called for, believe me. Okay. And also, I apologize for being late. I was with lawyers and I couldn't get away.
I'm glad you got away. Jael?
I guess, yeah, that was the first climate council meeting I attended. I still didn't know what I was doing, but I want to know how much the study is going to be, because I really feel like there's better ways to spend this money than doing this study. And that's my opinion. It's like, I think we know enough that we need to move away from biomass. So I'm just curious, like, what exactly is the study going to tell us and how much is it going to cost?
There isn't a number associated with cost that I'm aware of, and I welcome Billy or others who have more information. If you want to know what it wants to look at, you can look in detail of what the council took up, and you'll look, the sections of it are really about understanding the emissions and the nuances of emissions from that, and then understanding economic implications for rural Vermont of such an action of a moratorium or moving away. That's what you can look in there's more detail in there, Jael, if you want to poke in there for a little bit. Jake? Oh, you did? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, just looking at what was developed in the last iteration and then the recommendation as it's currently phrased, and maybe that we talked about this in the last meeting, was, are we exclude when we're saying you know, stop or put in place a moratorium on biomass as an energy source, is that specific to electrical generation, electricity? Is that all forms of biomass energy generation, which would include thermal? I just want to understand, like, either how refined or expansive that notion is.
Great question. Task group folks, when you wrote that this week, what were you thinking when you wrote the word energy source?
Everything.
Everything thermal, electric. Okay.
I
Great.
also have a comment about the paper that you put up. I was on the biomass task force and Ag and Eco. The 15 presenters who spoke with the biomass task group that it talks about, they did not speak with the biomass task group. What the biomass task group did was watch the videos of the 15 presenters who presented to the Ag and Ecosystems Committee. And they were full of studies and full of charts that they presented that showed how detrimental this is to the health of people and the land. And so this whole comment here, I mean, this was written by not the committee. Let's put it that way.
Correct. It was written by the council. Yeah.
And so there's errors in there.
Okay. I'm seeing in the chat some, like, are we talking utility scale energy source? I think it's important clarifications for some folks. I'm curious what people are thinking that.
Like Earl's raising his
Earl?
hand.
Yeah. Go ahead, Earl, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, that's exactly right. Biomass is thermal energy. That's how you produce energy for the grid. And what we're talking about is the grid. Stop burning stuff to generate electricity. We can do better than that. It's not helping the greenhouse gas problem.
So would it be a rephrasing of that line that was written? State agencies shall eliminate the use of biomass as a utility scale energy source. Is that fair?
Yeah.
What we're saying?
Yeah, I think so. If Judy also agrees, but yeah, that's my thinking.
So I would have to stop using my wood stove. I'm just trying to understand the implications.
No,
of
we're
this.
talking about electricity
Oh, electricity.
generation
Okay, thank
for
you.
the grid. Okay.
Yeah, just
Thank
just
you. Yeah.
asking for
Saying it, but
clarification.
people keep jumping the other way.
Can I just share something I found out this week? One of the questions we had last year was about monitoring. Where are the monitors? Are they monitoring the top of the smokestack? Why are we closing in this summer for a particulate matter of 2.5 when there's a fire in Canada, but McNeil is 2.5 and we don't close? So we had these discussions throughout the various committees that I served on. What I found out this week was the monitor was put in a valley that was a ravine that was 14,000 years old, 2 miles away from McNeil. And when they started the construction on Main Street in Burlington this summer, they had to move it and close it down. They haven't repositioned it anyplace. And we have all these people suffering with COPD and asthma attacks in this area, and nobody's even friggin' monitoring it. We got to do something. We got to pay attention to this. It's a mess.
So in that spirit, I'm throwing in the chat right now 3 options about how you as a subcommittee feel represented on your views of biomass. What I'm going to ask is in the chat, each of the subcommittee members, again, I'll just ask just subcommittee members now, sort of put in the chat 1, 2, or 3, which of these options most reflects your views on this topic, right? And let's just take this pulse check of where we're at and then decide how we're going to transmit this to the council.
Before we do that, I'd like to just share my own thoughts, if that's okay, David.
Billy, are you a facilitator?
I'm a member of the subcommittee and a co-chair.
Facilitators don't usually share their thoughts.
No, he's not. He's a co-chair.
I'm a co-chair of the subcommittee. and a
Okay, thank
member.
you.
So I guess I'm concerned with any recommendation that would call for the closing down of existing facilities, first and foremost, primarily from a just transitions perspective. There's a significant number of Vermonters whose livelihood is tied to wood fuel as an energy source. Either work at facilities that consume that fuel or produce it as a byproduct of their other timber management activities. And a big part of the study that the council has asked for looks at the implications on those folks and opportunities to transition them out to other professions in a just and timely way. So I will strongly oppose anything that includes an immediate or a near-term change away from those existing facilities because of that. So just wanted to put that out there, but as we're just considering other options.
Thanks, Billy.
I think there's a lot more options than this too. One of the ones we talked about before was a transition period, or as Earl says, what do you call it, Earl?
Moratorium.
Moratorium. This transition period would be to not allow any more to be built while we work on either fixing or eliminating the others. And to bring up subjects like the labor force and stuff like that is not appropriate for this group, because this group has not had all the 15 scientists who presented. They do not have that information. And so although it has to be considered, it needs to be considered in a transition, not here in this room.
Well, that's your opinion, Judy. I appreciate that. But we did hear in our public input meetings from the farm, forest, and non-working land sector, clear comments from certain members of that stakeholder group that these projects have real implications on the people who work in it. So
I realize that, Billy, but I'm
heard.
looking at the faces on this and the names on this thing, and most of those people did not hear that. That's what I'm trying to point out to you. So you're asking them to make a decision on something they've not heard any information on.
But none of us have heard any of the information you're referring to, Judy. We haven't dug into this issue as a subcommittee this year, right?
Exactly. That's why I think we should go with stop now till it's further. We haven't had time to blink on this committee this year. It's moved too fast, and there's been too much to do and too many things ignored because of it, because of the speed in which it's had to move.
Okay. Earl, and then I do want to do the exercise of just taking the temperature of how we feel. Now, we don't have everyone from the subcommittee here. That's for sure. We're missing a bunch of folks. But just for those who are here, interested to take your temperature on this issue. Earl?
Yeah, is the goal of this state to reduce its carbon emissions, or to protect forestry jobs with the expanded biomass use? Because that's what I see happening.
Right. I think if you look at the mandate of this group and the Climate Council, which created this group, it's the emissions piece, it's the just transitions piece, it's the cost of effectiveness piece. It's all those pieces that are wrapped into the mandate of the GWSA, and that's why it makes it hard, right?
And maintaining an undeveloped landscape, which we've heard, the forest products industry is a contributor to. So that's another element of this.
So in what Jake's saying in the chat, right, correct, the three options, again, this is me grabbing language. The first option is the language that the task group brought to the table today, inserted with the word utility scale. So eliminate the use of biomass at utility scale. That's one, right? And stop referring to it as renewable energy. Number two is what we talked about last time, and also Earl brought up this time, fund and undertake the study as soon as possible. In the meantime, have a moratorium on approvals of any new biomass energy facilities. Right? And then number 3 would be similar to 2, but instead of talking about a moratorium, draw the attention to the language at the back of, at the bottom of that document that I showed you, which is, hey, PUC, you should be looking at these same things that we care about, emissions, economic impacts, et cetera. So those are the 3 things. I just want to take folks' temperature. So if you're a subcommittee member, I would really ask you to, in the chat, be like, yeah, I can live with 1 and 2, or my strong preference is 3, or whatever. Just give a sense of where your mind's at. And I'm curious because I want to tease out every single subcommittee member who's on this call. Let's get a sense of where you're at. Thanks, Andrew, for doing that, and Jake. Okay, fair enough. Thanks, Alyssa. Billy, thank you. Thanks, Earl. Thanks, Judy. Okay. Okay. So if just you're looking at the same thing I'm looking at, right? Which is the chat. And in the chat, what I'm seeing is a number of folks saying number 2 with some caveats, like if the cost of the study is reasonable. One person saying number 3. And I'm trying to see what Stephen's saying here. Number 2, Stephen as well. 1 and 2 for Earl. 1, 2, 3, Judy. 1 and 2 for Jael. So if I look at this in the same way you're looking at this, it feels like among members of the subcommittee who are here today, a large number of you are feeling represented by number 2. Not unanimous. A large number of you are represented by number 2. Some of you also feel represented by number 1. I bet we can write something up that says, you know, a large number of the subcommittee felt represented by this statement, right? Others felt differently, right? And looked at statements such as the number 1 and number 3, right? So we could write a little blurb like that that says, this is what's come up from those who were participating in this meeting today. Does that seem like a good little paragraph to write up? And Ryan, I'm not sure I saw yours on here. Ryan, do you want to jump in?
I'm not voting on this. I look at the IPCC's publication about life cycle emissions per fuel source, and median values for forest biomass is well below all fossil fuels. And you know, people like to talk about the point of the smokestack. That's not all it takes to develop fuels. And so when we think about transitions and what is a just transition, I do think that you know, you have to be circumspect about what recommendations mean for land use industries that, you know, are really struggling. And so I don't want to get into an argument about science or those values because this is not my area of expertise. But you know, I hear a lot of very strong voices on one side, and you know, before I'd be willing to make a vote, I think not that we're a committee that does this, but we'd have to take some testimony or hear from others on you know, alternative peer-reviewed science on what is the life cycle balance of different fuel sources. Thanks.
Thanks, Ryan. And again, what we're doing here is developing the best sort of paragraph around what this group feels would be an appropriate recommendation on biomass. There is all that material with the 15 presenters and everything from before that's been available. I'm looking at the time as well, and I'm worried we're going to start losing folks. I want to test if folks are okay with what I said, which is based on what we see in the chat and each of you weighing in that are here today from the subcommittee, there is a large number of this subcommittee, a majority of those who are present, that are comfortable with a statement like number 2, and others feel more comfortable with other statements such as number 3 or number 1. And we can send that up and say, this subcommittee did not spend much if any time on this. And this is as far as it's got. So I want to test folks' willingness to capture that in like a paragraph that says, this is as far as we got as a subcommittee. Judy?
Yeah, I'm concerned with what Ryan's comments because he sat through all those 15 scientists' presentations. And so I'm a little curious.
No, I didn't. I wasn't on the biomass group committee.
The presentations did not go to the biomass. They went to Ag and Eco. Biomass only watched the videos of the ones that
we
were
had
at.
our own task group that consisted of Ag and Ecos and cross-sector mitigation subcommittee members. And then there was another group of council members who watched the videos, but all those experts came into that cross-sector and Ag Ecos group that you and I were on, Judy, but that Ryan was not on.
They came to the Ag and Ecosystem subcommittee. Those people.
Yeah, we don't need to solve that. I think, Judy, there was what is known as the biomass group that Billy is talking about that you were on.
I was on the biomass group. Billy was not.
Okay.
No.
I want to find a way for you all as a subcommittee today to reflect where your views are. And we can caveat it in saying, this group did not spend time on this issue. Its views are best captured like this, like the way I just described. And I just want to test if folks are comfortable capturing the views based on that little exercise we just did in the chat. And knowing you're not unanimous on this, and yet there was a large number of folks in the chat comfortable with that language of the number 2 language, right? Which is do the study. In the meantime, moratorium on new approvals. And comments like Jael's in the comments like, hey, I'd actually rather see the money. Like we can say for some members, they'd like to do that, right? But the one thing where we can say a large number of you, particularly those who are present in this meeting, is that number 2 language. Thanks, Stephen. Okay. Would anybody be uncomfortable writing that up as having that written up as the way that as far as you got, right? With the caveats, you didn't actually invest significant meaning time in this.
I'm not happy with that.
Okay. How would you like that adapted, Judy?
I would like us to have the discussion to make a true statement, not something, I mean, passing it on to PUC is going to do nothing.
Yeah.
They're too busy. They're overworked. Nothing is going to happen.
Well,
Okay.
any of this would require legislation, right? Like a state aid, we can't just say stop using biomass, right? Like
Yeah, the council does not have the power to do it. It's
Yeah.
a recommendation that others take that up. And I think one thing, Judy, about number 2 is it's not about the PUC. Number 2 is calling for a moratorium on new, it's a recommendation for a moratorium on new biomass facilities while this study gets done. So it's not the language about the PUC. That would have been number 3.
Right. And the study has been supposedly trying to get done for what? I think Jane told me since 2019 or 2020.
this addendum was
council
passed in
asked for it
December 2023.
2023.
So
Right.
it's
But
less
they
than a
had
year
it
old.
years before. They had it years before. Jane told me that the other night in our meeting.
Okay. I don't know about that. I'm just testing folks. Like, it sounds like in the chat, we're able to coalesce around that number 2 language as what is most representative for people who are in this meeting. Others have other views. We can add those in, and we can capture that in a paragraph. I saw Andrew say yes, he had to jump off. Earl in the chat, thank you, Stephen. Just double checking that kind of paragraph language is going to be as good as we can get on this very tricky issue right now.
I think that's fair, David, as long as it acknowledges that folks were on either side of two.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't want to shortchange any other input folks had on task group 3. I also want to create an opportunity for public comment. So if folks can hang in there a little bit longer, can we do just a few minutes of public comment and then circle back and round this whole thing up about what happens next, and anything else we need to say before you all present to the council. So if you've been joining our meeting today as a member of the public and you would want to offer some input, now's the time to do that. Okay. I'm not seeing that right now. I want to circle back. Unfortunately, Andrew's off the phone, off the call now. I want to circle back to task group 3. Any other last things folks want to offer up? We kind of pushed quickly through that. It seemed like folks were aligned on it. Anything else on task group 3 language?
I just
Only
have,
that we incorporated every comment that people gave us.
thank you.
Thanks, Judy. And then could we quickly, and I don't see, is Ryan's still here? Yeah, on the issue of the education and technical assistance, it kind of sounded, Andrew put up the idea of the core language there from task group 3 is around talking about those other land, stewards is the word? I don't have it right in front of me. Could someone in task group 3 remind me what that language is? It's
Yeah, we wouldn't use the
caretaker.
words. Yes, we
Caretaker.
wouldn't use the word steward or stewardship because it shows hierarchy.
Got it. Okay, caretakers is the language. So land and waters caretakers, and also being able to braid Western science in traditional ecological knowledge and indigenous knowledge. Those are key components. So I'm wondering, in the 3 pieces of education and technical assistance that we have across the 3 task groups, are we comfortable with an overarching one that weaves in that language? And then Ryan, I want to make sure we don't lose the point you're trying to make, that there's some specific delivery mechanisms in place now that task group 1 is nodding to. So we need to be able to do that. Someone to put in the chat, I can't remember, I think Andrew, like, could we do an umbrella thing and then have some bullets underneath it to do anything specific we need to do? I'm curious if anybody has some quick thoughts on that, because your co-chairs could do this and consolidate.
Task group 1 has taken the functioning service delivery model and put it into 4 key areas. I'm not supportive of changing the language or merging with anything else. Those 4 need to be together if you want to capacitate those farmers and loggers and others to actually sequester carbon. So I don't support integrating them. We can have a high level thing about education, how important it is, and totally fine with seeing task group 3's action on education. Like, the language is great, it's perfect, but I don't want to combine or lose the 4 task group 1 recommendations. Thanks.
Right, so you need that language needs to show up. Yeah. Okay. All right. Are folks comfortable with your co-chairs just fixing that and reaching out to anybody if they have any doubts about how to do that, so that we can hit what we need to hit on the education and technical assistance? We use the language we need from task group 3. We make sure we keep the language from task group 1 and the particular emphasis on that language. Anybody uncomfortable with your co-chairs just fixing that and making it coherent? Okay, great. I don't think there's other things to do. Jake, you got a couple nips and tucks to do on yours, right? And I have notes on those. Can we talk about next steps? I think a package needs to be together by Friday to go up to the council. It sounds like we're on track for that. I will say we didn't look at the bigger package of pathway strategies and actions coming out of each task group. And so my recommendation, as I said earlier, was could we can pass those along, and with a pretty big caveat that you as a subcommittee actually haven't done the collective deep dive on all of those. And you would like to do that in the coming weeks. As co-chairs, I don't want to get out on my skis on this, but it seems like that's kind of a missing step, and you got to do it.
Yeah, we do have a full subcommittee meeting on the calendar for next Thursday. So we could certainly, if folks are still available, dedicate time to tie up those ends at that meeting.
Okay. So folks comfortable with that? So pulling those pieces together, Jake, it means getting yours together. It looks like task group 3 has their full document along with those priorities. And then Ryan, your package of full pathway strategies and actions from task group 1, and getting all that together this afternoon into tomorrow. Sound good? And we'll caveat the heck out of the full package so people know there's still work to do. Okay. Great. And then you all meet again next week. So what you can do when that package is together in the next day or two, then it's incumbent on all the steering committee members to do their own deep read into it all and come next Thursday ready to flag things that you think really need attention from the full subcommittee. Deep in the weeds of the pathway strategies and actions. So everyone's got to do a little reading to make that meeting work next week.
What time is that meeting?
I don't know.
It is from 10 to 12. It was the last of the kind of standing meetings we had scheduled some months ago.
Okay. Thanks. Okay. Billy, Jael, anything else?
So just to recap, we're going to get kind of final versions from the 3 task group leads. If anything's changed based on these conversations, Jael and I will work to make the kind of technical assistance actions kind of consistent across at least 2 of the 3 task groups. We'll kind of send those up. And then we'll get together next week as a group to talk about the other recommended changes and updates to the other actions that folks have been working on and try to get that finalized next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds right to me. Everybody okay with that? Okay. Great. Thank you, everyone.
David, could maybe I and JL just stay on for a second to talk logistics once we wrap up? Great.
I'm happy to do that. And it's not my link, so I don't know whether it'll actually stay open.
I'll keep it open. I'll keep it open.
Liz is here.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Liz. And yes, that sounds great. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate everyone hanging in there. I feel like we land in a remarkably good place, even in the frustrating conditions of what you're being asked to do. So thank you all. And I encourage you all to listen in to the council meeting next Monday when we walk through this stuff, and then do the reading and come next Thursday ready for any cleanup on the final actions and stuff.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Great. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Billy, I'm happy to stay on.
Yeah, I think just 5 minutes. So maybe we're adjourned. You can